Good morning. It's February 25th, and you're with the SMGDenver group, Social Marketing Group in Denver. And we get together twice a month to talk about, to sort of enhance the conversation that we have at our regular meetups. We have a meetup the third Friday of every month, and it's sponsored by Webolutions. It's actually sponsored, organized, and conducted by Webolutions, which is a local digital marketing agency. And they get us going on some conversations in general about social media and very specifically about social marketing. Today's episode is called Continuing the Conversation because we just had a meetup on Friday here in Denver, and we talked about converting leads to sales, and we want to pick up on that conversation. Some of the topics or some of the highlights of that conversation on Friday, we talked about deciding what social media techniques to use depending on whether you're a B2B organization or a B2C organization. That's business to business or business to consumer or business to consumer or client customer. So we talked about those kinds of techniques. We talked about tools. We learned about some tools specifically that you can use on Facebook to engage your audience and attract your audience and reward your audience. So we learned some very cool things. I didn't know about a lot of the things that we learned about on Friday, and I'm looking forward to trying them out. And we also talked about using social media to enhance your event, your trade shows, or your seminars or conferences. So we covered a lot of information, and as usual, it never seems like we have enough time to explore all the stuff that we learn on Friday. So this group, these panelists today, we're all members of the Social Media Marketing Group in Denver, and we're also all members of the private Google community that we've put together for our group. So I'm going to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves. We're not going to spend a lot of time on our resumes and our backgrounds because all of us are linked in the description of this event, so you can go and check out our resumes, but we are all here in Denver, so I've asked each of our panelists to say a little something about Denver. And I'm going to go in order of my film strip, so I'm going to start with Gary, then go with Leland, and then Neal, and then Peter. And by the way, Neal doesn't have video. We just have some technical issues, so no video for Neal, but he's a good-looking guy right there in that picture, so you can enjoy that. So let me start out with Gary, then, if you'll introduce yourself.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Gary Pokorn. I'm a sales professional that has been hanging out with this group of marketing colleagues to try to understand their paradigm on the overall generation of leads and ultimately sales. I'm a Denver Broncos fan, originally from Chicago, moved to Denver in 1991 and never turned around.
Excellent. Okay, Leland.
I've been in Denver for 35 years. I'm a marketer and have a passion for marketing versus sales. I believe there's a place for both of them, but I believe it starts with marketing, with getting into the heads of the people.
And Leland, how long have you been in Denver?
35 years.
Woohoo! Okay. And Neal?
Well, I've only been in Denver since 1953. Don't spit your coffee out.
I almost did.
I saw that. I've had various positions in sales, but I like to observe. I'm a great observer of people, and I really try and listen to what they're saying to find out where their head's at.
Okay. And Peter?
Hi, I'm Peter Hodges. I'm Marketing Director for Marathon Consulting and Stack Advisors. My parents moved to Denver in 1968. My dad needed a teaching job. I showed up 4 years later. So I've been in Denver for 41 years. Got my college degree in theater, turned that into a marketing career because it's storytelling either way, and here we are.
Really great. Okay, so we have one native here in Colorado, right? Peter?
Yep.
And that's one of the things that I notice about Denver. As of July 7th, I'll be here in Denver for 30 years. I can't believe it. And Gary, I didn't realize you were from Chicago. I also am from Chicago. And like you, I never looked back once I got here. Not that I'm not proud of being from Chicago, because I truly am, but boy do I love Denver. So before we get started, what I'd like to do is introduce you to John Harris. Good morning, John. John is normally on this panel. He's one of the pillar panelists, and so thanks for being there, John, and hopefully you'll be able to join the conversation from the other side. We also want to say good morning to Sheila, who is far, far away over in the UK. And Sheila, you've been really, really committed to attending our HOAs via comments. So thank you for being here. It's great to have you. All right, so I'm going to just undo our comments here, I think. And I will be driving the controls over here, so we're going to leave this conversation up to our panelists and our commenters. Oh, and by the way, I just want to say John Harris just left a comment. He's also a native, so we've got two natives on this. So let's get right down to it. So we talked about, at the Social Marketing Group on Friday, we talked about converting leads to sales. And most of these leads, of course, are coming to us through social media, but a lot of the leads, come through our personal referrals and things like that. But then we can take that lead and build up on it and turn it into a sale with social media. So I'm going to just throw it out to the panel. Any one of you, go ahead and jump in and give me, or give us your initial thoughts on this topic. Anyone?
Well,
go ahead, Peter.
You bet. For social media, I think I'm beginning to believe more and more in what we were calling, John and I were calling the coffee and donuts rule. That people are going to do their research through social media. They're going to find out about you. They're going to check your about page to see where you've been, how long you've been in business, things like that. At some point through the sales cycle, they're going to start to look for reasons to knock people out. They'll have 4 or 5 kind of finalists, so to speak. And we think that social media is a good way to make sure that you stay in the running by sharing blog posts, by sharing different links to trade journals, by just expressing your personality.
Right, and you know what? It was in one of our earlier HOAs, Peter, that you talked about the coffee and donuts. Can you kind of describe it and tell us where that came from? What does coffee and donuts mean?
Sure. Thank you. Back when my college degree, like I said, was in theater, and a senior year we take an audition class, and one of the instructors pointed out that you can be brilliant, you can be the best actor they've seen in 3 weeks, but if they don't think you're going to be fun to have coffee and donuts with at 6:30 in the morning, if they think you might be a prima donna or you might not be reliable, they're going to go with someone who might be 80% as talented, but is going to be fun to hang out with at late at night, early in the morning, and that they can count on to show up on time. That kind of a thing.
Okay, all right, and so that's kind of a a metaphor that we can all relate to. We know who we like to hang out with, and I think that in social media, now that we're evolving, businesses are realizing people don't want to hang out with anybody who's going to constantly be shoving their business card in their face. So it's more like creating a relationship. Now, last Tuesday, we framed this conversation. In other words, we previewed the topic of converting leads to sales, and we talked very specifically about persona. Customer personas, the perfect client, things like that, so that we could know who we were talking to. And when you know somebody, it's much easier to have a conversation. So let me bring this to Carrie Kaushik, who is the I don't remember what her title is at Webolutions. She's a social media strategist, maybe.
I think that's right.
Yeah, something like that. And she shared with us all these cool things that they were doing using tools to be engaging, specifically on Facebook. So they were running contests, for example. I know that John Harris, who is watching this right now. I think they've been kind of dabbling with the idea of running some contests on their Facebook page. Has anyone here on this panel done that sort of thing?
We have. Marathon owns season tickets to the Yankees, and we gave away a set of tickets to a game last fall and did it through Facebook. So we spent 3 weeks promoting the Yankee season ticket giveaway, and it was mildly effective. And the reason I say mildly is, as an IT firm, we're looking for IT executives, service managers at technology companies, things like that, and it found it to be a little bit difficult to reach the right people. So we shifted kind of how we were looking at it, and it became just sort of a branding opportunity. So,
you know what, and you bring up a good point here, Peter, because one of the things that Jody Martin shared right at the very beginning of our meetup on Friday was that, there's the B2B and there's the B2C. And Gary, I think you actually brought this up in a conversation last week. You were commenting from the outside of the HOA, but you said, that's one of the things, a very important distinction you need to make, the B2B or the B2C. Now, Jody in the meetup mentioned that the sales cycle is a bit longer for B2B as opposed to B2C. And what you were just describing, Peter, was you're going for an IT professional, you're looking for business people, and so offering up tickets as sort of an enticement, something to attract, that's sort of the first stage in, like you said, it was a branding thing. It's letting people know that you were there and attracting them and getting them interested, and it's not going to happen immediately because that sales cycle is a bit longer for B2B. And so, am I right on that? I mean, will you run more contests, Peter?
Potentially. We need to figure out better targeting. Because with the Facebook targeting, at the time we ran it, it was still pretty broad in terms of New York City. And then we tried to target based on interests, but they had like computer video games as opposed to, information cloud storage as an interest that you could target. So that, I think, is the key there. If we were to do it again, I would probably use LinkedIn, because then you can get more professional selects in order to narrow down your audience.
Can I add something, Debbie?
Absolutely.
I've been studying, we talked about it last week, the whole persona and archetypes of business, and one of the things that I've concluded, and this is my opinion, it goes back to Peter Drucker, a pretty famous marketing consultant back in the 80s and 90s, and he said marketing makes sales superfluous. And what he meant by that was that marketing sets the stage for sales, so when sales goes in, their job is fairly easy. Basically, they're closing it. So to me, there's two things in play here that I tend to disagree with a lot of marketing and salespeople about, and that is that I don't think there's a B2B and a B2C. Yeah, there's the link to the sales cycle and things like that that are relevant, but basically, I think we're marketing P2P, person to person, or H to H, human to human, and I think Google Plus is actually extending the ability to do that because of the authenticity and everything that's incorporated into the algorithms. So my opinion is that basically we're marketing human to human, and the best way to get there is to develop these relationships. I go back to when I was growing up, my dad had this relationship with a butcher, and we'd go into the butcher shop, and he would pretty much know what my dad wanted to buy before he even started talking. So they wouldn't even talk about what he was buying. They would talk about life and how everybody was doing and so forth, and it was a relationship. And then the buying cycle, the buyer-selling relationship just happened automatically. And I think that's where we have to get. That's how and I think Google Plus especially gives us that ability. I think LinkedIn and a couple others do too. I'm not a big fan of Facebook personally because I think there's a lot of trite stuff on there. But as far as business marketing and using social media, I think LinkedIn and Google Plus both give us the ability to develop those relationships and then build our sales or marketing team around that.
Yeah, and Leland, first of all, you and I are exchanging some persona building tools that you and I are both, organizing around this. So I did not get a chance yet to look at what you sent me yesterday, but I think between the two of us, we're gonna, we're probably gonna really be able to flesh out this subject. Now, Gary, while you're taking your cup of coffee there, if you don't mind me asking, because I know that you're very, very much the sales professional and really understand the sales side of it. I mean, you train salespeople, you help people understand the sales philosophy, and I applaud you for throwing yourself into this group of marketers, because there is sometimes very different opinions of this. But I would really like to hear your take on this. Do you see social media changing the way we look at sales and marketing?
Well, I think there's certainly a lot of discussion about social media marketing, and clearly that's what has attracted me to the Social Media Marketing for Business Meetup that sort of introduced us all together. But, I would say that I have not come to any conclusions. Perhaps similar to Neal, I'm still trying to understand and still trying to listen to the buyer's perspective. What I do feel is drawing conclusions on how the buyer buys in this century based on work that was done last century is very 1990s. I think the market has shifted in how people buy, and I think the concept of persona has multiple dimensions. So the same person's persona as portrayed on Facebook is probably a different dimension than how that person portrays his or her persona on LinkedIn, and is probably different than how that same person portrays their persona in their profession. And so I think we deal in a plural situation today versus a singular situation today. And so I've yet to see research. I've yet to see statistics. I've yet to see any empirical evidence that shows how these tools impact how buyers buy. I think there's a lot of opinion and judgment, and I think there's a lot of anecdotal evidence, but I'm more of a process-oriented thinker, and I'd like to base my process on sound research. And as I mentioned in our meetup on Friday, other than interviewing our existing clients, which was the suggested method for establishing persona, salespeople do that all of the time. I've yet to see any other research that I feel confident is based on this century.
Okay, and before I move on,
I'm going to jump in here. I agree with what Gary is saying, because when a salesperson goes in, the first thing he wants to do is establish commonality with the prospect. And once you have that commonality, then you go from there. So you're trying to establish that commonality using social media. You're trying to find out what the personality of the person is like, what their values are, their interests, their attitudes, what their lifestyle is like. And it's really difficult to do that, because Peter was trying to do that through Facebook and offering tickets, but he wasn't finding it that effective, because like Gary was saying, we're different in different aspects of our lives. So you've really got to hone down on where you want to reach that prospective buyer. Do you want to reach them on Facebook, which is more personal? Because I'm totally different on Facebook than I am on LinkedIn.
Right.
And so we've got to look at where that person is, which goes back to that persona, what their values are, their interests in that specific area, and reach them in that way.
One of the fun things, though, to use the ticket giveaway as an example, is besides the cost of the tickets, it costs us about $100 to test it. So like an old direct marketer, a lot of the Facebook promotion was a test to see whether or not we should continue doing it. And we learned our lesson that it's probably not the best venue to reach if we're trying to prospect, if we're trying to develop clients, probably not the best. If we're branding, giving away Yankees tickets as opposed to a white paper about cloud storage backup for your business was probably a good move, because it was a low-key, fun thing for people to engage with on Facebook. So I would encourage people also to just think about testing things. It's really inexpensive, and if you design it well, you'll get a lot of data to understand whether or not you should keep doing it.
Yeah, and here we go again, thinking of ways to use social media to enhance our process for converting leads to sales. And so, and I want to apologize. I did not check everybody's lower thirds. Our lower thirds are not working very well. But and Gary, I'm going to address a question to you again. But I'm going to ask you to turn your audio up or speak a little closer to your mic, because apparently you're a little bit subtle. So anyways, so Gary, do you see social media as a way of maybe previewing a relationship or getting to know a person a little bit better? Because that has to be an important part of the sales is, who am I going to be talking to today? Is social media used at all to go and lurk a little bit, look at their LinkedIn profile, or see what they're doing on social media?
So yes, I certainly feel there's great value to social media. I don't know how to quantify that value, but I believe it's valuable. As a sales professional, I would challenge some of the underlying assumptions, right? I don't believe the modern buyer today begins their buying process with a relationship. I believe relationship-based sales is very 1990s. I think the buyer today, as evidenced by the research that was shared at the meetup on Friday, the modern buyer today does a lot of their buying or evaluation steps before the salesperson enters the picture. So for that very first meeting between the buyer and the sales rep, the buyer's already well down the path of evaluating, and they use social media tools for such evaluation. But I suggest that the tools they use are not LinkedIn or Facebook or Google+. I find in the business-to-business setting that the buyer is on professional chat sites. For instance, in the finance world, there's a forum called Proformative, which is a gathering of finance professionals, and they can exchange a lot of feature, function, price, best practice information socially on that site. And oftentimes I'll see my company's name in the form of a question. Hey, has anybody bought from this company? What are the advantages and disadvantages? How does it compare to brand X, Y, or Z? So there's certainly a place for social media, but by the time a salesperson enters the picture with a prospective buyer, I believe the buyer is totally focused on their transaction, and they want to get the answers to their questions around their transaction addressed first. I believe the relationship comes later. And so it's just the opposite, I believe, of how sales process worked last century. Last century, there was a big emphasis on establishing trust and rapport first, creating a relationship first, and then moving into the transaction. I believe buyers are in a hurry today. I don't believe in 3 to 6 to 9 month sales cycles. I believe once the buyer has decided that they're going to engage in a transaction and they're seeking somebody to fulfill that transaction, I think the relationship comes at the end, not at the beginning.
You know what? We're going to have you on more often, Gary, because it really is interesting. It makes it for a very comprehensive discussion. I want to bring up John Harris's comment here, and I think what he's doing is actually kind of, saying the same thing. One sign that social media affects buying was a recently released Forbes report, which indicates that the average consumer has traversed 80% of the research funnel before they call. And I think, Gary, I think that's what you're saying, is that they're in a hurry. They've done the research, and they're ready to do the transaction. It says much of this is done via social media. This is rapidly making a sales rep more of a deal closer than a salesperson. Would you agree with that, Gary?
Well, I think this particular research, I suspect it deals with B2C because it uses the word consumer. So that's what I mean when I talk about research, and we have to be very careful of assumptions based on research. If that's a B2C set of research, then it does not cross over easily in a B2B setting. In the B2C side of the world, I don't believe there's a sales cycle anymore. In the B2C world, I believe there's just a buying cycle, and the salesperson is just there to complete for the consumer whatever the consumer cannot complete on their own. I think the consumer would just as soon make the purchase on their own, but in some settings, the vendor, if you will, requires an interaction with the sales rep. And so the buyer has to go through that final step just to get the transaction done. In a business-to-business setting, I think there's more complexities, there's more committee-based buying and such. So research like that, again, I believe in a business-to-business setting, I do believe the buyer is well down the path of their evaluation process, but I think some of the B2C research cannot be immediately transferred over to a B2B setting.
And it really is a pretty complex undertaking to figure out how to, if social media should be a part of it, and then how to use it. Gary, I know that you have to, you're off to your weekly meeting with your colleagues at 8 o'clock, and I really, really appreciate you being here this morning and giving us kind of, a much different, not a different perspective, but a reminder of, we're all coming at this from different angles. So thank you very much for being here this morning. I hope you'll be on more of these HOAs, because these conversations can be, very interesting when we hear it both from the sales and the marketing side. So any last parting words before you head off to your real job?
Well, thank you for inviting me, and I would be happy to continue the conversation with this cautionary sign-off. Be careful what you ask for.
Be careful what you ask for.
Have a nice day, everybody.
Thank you, Gary. Bye-bye. Okay, so I wanted to bring Gary in early because I knew that he was going to have to leave. So we really, heard a lot from the sales side of it, and it is definitely part of the mix when we're using social media. So, you know what? I haven't even read this comment, but Sandra just jumped on, and I'm going to quickly put it up because she's always got something good to say. The buyer definitely does the research before the purchase, but the last step is determining why I want to buy from X versus Y.
Exactly.
This is where social media and developing a relationship through engagement happens. There is now the trust factor in the buying cycle, and social media is part of developing the trust of a company and persons. And really, really good points to keep in mind. So whether we're a marketer or a sales professional, social media now it's just another tool that we get to use to do our job well.
Yeah, can I jump in, Debbie?
Please.
Mike Hanbery, who is one of the main drivers of the group, he and I met through Twitter. And I learned that he was a New Orleans Saints fan. I learned that he had 2 kids. I learned that he was in marketing, all before I ever met him in person. And what I like to tell people when they ask me, why the heck should I worry about, sharing personal stuff? You want to share a reasonable amount of personal stuff, because that awkward 15 minutes getting to know someone at the networking event has already been taken care of. When I finally met Hanbery, it's as if we had been friends. So to Sandra's point, if you use social effectively and carefully, you can give them those indicators of whether or not you're a good fit personally, without ever meeting them.
My experience, goes back to LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn might have been my first social network that I got into, or social media that I used. And exactly the same thing, Peter, was that before I met with somebody, I checked to see if they had a LinkedIn profile, because that first meeting, that first face-to-face meeting, was so much more, it was richer right from the very beginning. I mean, immediately you could relate, and the relationship is, so, Gary was saying he thinks the relationship comes later. Well, what, coming from his point of view, maybe sometimes the relationship does come later, but for what you and I do, perhaps the relationship comes first. So again, it's all going to be different ways that we use these tools.
One of the ways, Debbie, if I might interject here, is that social media has changed marketing fairly drastically, I believe. I don't know how many people here have used some of the traditional database marketing tools like Claritas, where it actually puts people into groups and basically profiles people, so you have different types of groups buying different types of things and for different reasons. Well, one of the latest groups that, and when I say latest, it's been within the last 4 or 5 years, that they did was called Neos. And Neos are typically Generation X and Millennials that actually have a pattern of finding out all the information about something that they want to buy on the internet, whether it's B2B or B2C, and then when they go into the store or they make contact with the person on the phone, they know what they want, and they may have a few questions, and at that point then the relationship becomes paramount, because the way they're treated depends on whether or not they stay there and make the purchase where they'd originally planned to, or whether they move someplace else. So this whole buying pattern that they called Neos really fits into this social media for marketing paradigm.
Can you tell me one more time, Leland? Maybe you said it and I missed it. Neos is?
It's just a definition. It's a buying group, basically, similar to young urban professionals and that kind of stuff. That's the way they used to categorize them, and they've changed some of these categories to be really more social. But Neos basically are primarily millennials. It's really stretching across a lot of age groups now, but primarily started out as the millennials and the Gen X groups. And these groups have developed a pattern of, because the information is so readily available on the internet, they've studied and they know exactly what they want to buy. They know, give you an example. One of the primary things that Neos buy across the board is Audis, and it's because of the dependability of the Audi. There's a lot of factors that play into that, and a part of it is the status symbol of the Audi, because it kind of makes them a Neo, and they want to be in that group. So there's a lot of things that play into it, but the bottom line is they know when they go into the Audi dealership that they want a red A4 with leather seats, with this audio video package, whatever. They know exactly what they want, and so then it's up to the salesperson at that point. The selling part of it takes place more in the form of, yes, okay, I know what you want here, let me show it to you, and that's a relationship right there that's developed. So the relationship developed after the marketing cycle, if you please.
Leland, we know that we're going to do more HOAs on this whole persona thing, because what you're bringing up again is something that we touched on a week ago on. Demographics is sort of the starting point, which is the age groups and that sort of thing. You brought up the point last week about sociographics. It's not when a person was born, but what they were born into, kind of related to the history and the economics and the social things that were happening. We talk about technographics, that is how do people use technology to make decisions. And then the other one was, help me here, Peter, it is psychographics, right? Psychographics, yes. On why they buy, not necessarily what and when, well, what and when, of course, but why, very specifically on why. So many things go into this, and we are trying to figure out how to bring in all of the social tools that we have to take into account our social behaviors. I'm just going to now, Neal is muted right now, but congratulations, Neal, you have your camera working.
Yes, I've been playing with it here.
Well, thank you, because we wanted to see you.
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So I'm glad that you're able to join us, so everyone can see that you really are a real person. So we're glad for that. But so we have we've got so many different aspects to pull into this, and we want to just make sure that we don't ignore the fact that social media is a big part of this whole formula. Now, Neal, I know that you need to leave us in about 4 minutes, and I know that you've been busy working on your camera over there, so you've been slightly distracted, but I do want to recognize the fact that you're here, and want to make sure that you don't have anything you want to say before you have to go.
No, I've been listening, and I really agree that you need to know the person. I remember the last time I made a big purchase is I researched the product, I researched everything online, and I knew what store I wanted to go to. It was just finding the one that had one in stock. But I did everything online that I needed to have done. So what we're saying here is correct. I feel from personal experience. But I think a lot of business decisions still have to be made on that personal level. If you like the person, you're going to buy from them, unless it's just a commodity you just want to buy. But if it's a major purchase, it depends upon, if you're going to have a relationship with the company, you want to buy from a company that you can relate to the person that you're dealing with.
Exactly. And I want to add a little bit to that, Neal, but again, I want to be sensitive to the fact that you need to be out at 8:10, and you know me, I've always got one eyeball on the clock. Because
well, I'm watching it also.
Okay, good. All right. So thank you for being on the show today. And thank you for contributing in the way you were able to. So when you have to click off, just do that. But again, you join this HOA whenever you can. And the other thing I want to mention is that one of the reasons we do these HOAs, particularly in order to be a panelist on our HOA, you need to be a member of our private community. And to be a member of the private community, you need to be a member of the SMG Denver, the Social Marketing Group in Denver, because what we're doing here is we're creating a safe and comfortable environment, and it's built a lot on relationships now that I think about it too, where we can get in here and try this technology out, work through our camera issues, work through our audio issues, the technology, learn how to use the comment tracker and things like that. So that's a big part of why we get together twice a month right here on a Google HOA. So that if you're in Denver and you want to join us at the social media group, I will put a link for our meetup group so that you can check us out. If you're not in Denver, and you just want to see how a really well-run meetup group goes, check out the link that I'll put into the comment section when we're finished up here, because Webolutions does a fabulous job of pulling us all together and giving us an opportunity to, I feel like I'm going to a university class every time I get together with this group. We learn so much from each other. So, and if anybody wants to jump in, please do, because I'll go on forever. But what I want to say is, you know, Neal brought up the relationship thing. It is, if you're going to do business with somebody, you want to know who they are. Let me tell you the relationship that helped me make a purchase, and it wasn't somebody who was trying to sell me something, but it was the first time I was transferring video to my computer. This is before I got on the Mac. This was 4 years ago maybe. And I was on Facebook sort of, you know, complaining to my sister, I can't figure out how to make this darn thing work. And one of her friends, who I have never met and had not met, even talked to at that point, he jumped into the conversation. He saw that my sister and I were talking. He's a friend of hers. And he got on there and he says, hey, Deb, you know, I'm sending you a link. It's on Amazon.com, but here's this cable that you need to make that work with your, you know, old-fashioned camcorder or something like that. So that that's also how relationships in social media work, because we help each other to make buying decisions. So just because I think, you know, I'll just use Starbucks because for some reason that's the first thing that came to mind. Just because I love Starbucks doesn't mean that I'm the only one who's going to benefit from that love. But if I constantly say, oh, you know, I love Starbucks and meet me at Starbucks and, you know, they've got a special deal at Starbucks, that filters out to my friends and those people I have a relationship to. So those, you know, we have to realize as business people that consumers are also educating each other on products and or services. And if they're getting a product or service from us as a business person, they're sharing it with their relationships. And we have to hope and do what we can to make sure that they're just saying great things about us all the time on social media.
I think that's where the authenticity and the humanity part of social media comes in. Because if you're being authentic and you're sharing what's important to you, and you're not holding back and trying to couch those words and phrases in some sort of a salesy manner, that comes across, and people know that, you know, wow, that sounds really exciting because it sounds like fun, it sounds human, it sounds authentic, and I think that's one of the things that I like about Google+. It's encouraged me to even do more of that and actually observe that and know what I'm doing and what other people are doing.
Yeah, and so now that we're down to 3, and you two guys here on this call are like marketing mavens. So I'm going to throw out some terms here that I know you're familiar with, and I don't know if I spent enough time concentrating on the difference between paid media, owned media, and earned media. And I think that the earned media part is very social media specific, and I think that that's one of those elements that I would like to learn more about. How do we have all 3 of those as a business person? How do we use paid, owned, and earned to complement each other? Any comments on that?
Have you been reading Chris Penn or Avinash?
Avinash, I've heard podcasts, but the other name I'm not familiar with it. What is it again?
Christopher Penn. He's one of Chris Brogan's buddies, and he talks a lot about paid, earned, and owned. As far as he's concerned, owned is your website and your email list. Because if you're on Facebook and or Google Plus or wherever, and you're just doing really, really well, you're still renting the space. A good example of, I would say maybe owned media or paid media, earned media, social media is becoming paid, because I've noticed for Marathon's Facebook page, the engagement numbers have gone steadily down because they want you to pay for it. I saw a tweet yesterday about how Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter are not the next MySpace. They're the next ABC, NBC, and CBS. They're becoming publishing platforms. They're becoming media platforms as opposed to social platforms. because it's going to be a pay-to-play sort of setup here very soon. If it already is.
Yeah, and there's a lot of conversation about that. I was on a HOA yesterday with Brian Clark, who is a big name in social.
Yeah. The copy blogger guy.
Yeah, and he, I think, is he still with Copy Blogger? I think he, I've been following him since 2009, and he's all over the place. But it was sort of an interesting HOA because he talked a lot about getting the most out of Facebook. He's a big proponent of using Facebook for business, but then on the other side of the coin, there is, particularly over in the Google arena, people are, really upset with the way Facebook has made it so it is a pay-to-play when it used to not be. So that is a big conversation, and yeah, you're right. I mean, it talks about earned media and owned media and paid media. So a whole nother ball of wax that involves us understanding social and how we can use those tools.
Absolutely. So it's just a matter of for paid, earned, and owned. Webolutions is a big proponent of everything should live on your own blog, and it's kind of a hub and spoke model. If everything's going to be on your blog, then you'll link out on Facebook, link out on Twitter, link out on LinkedIn, because that drives everyone back to your real estate. Scott Stratten, who is he does UnMarketing. He does a podcast, and he has UnMarketing Twitter handle. He's written a number of books. He has a great speech lately about how you can't be mad at Facebook for charging you to get your message out there. He compares it to 5 years ago. They said, "Hey, would you like to have a room in my house for free? And would you like to, eat the groceries? And would you like to sit at the kitchen table? And now I might have to charge you a little bit of rent. I hope you don't mind." It's still their house, was his point. So
and you're right. We all do want to get kind of all lathered up about the fact, oh, they're charging money, and that they have that right. And I have made that argument with some people. I've had a discussion that they have that right to do it, and so we as business people need to decide: is it a value to us? If it's valuable, we're going to be willing to pay whatever they, and it's not a lot of money. They're not charging a lot of money for these privileges. So you're right. I mean, it's probably the best deal in town when you talk about advertising and promoting. It's probably the best deal in town. So it's good to look at that and not get ourselves turned off, because for the principle of it,
Right.
So and so you know what, Peter, if you would please just jot a note to yourself to maybe you referred to a book and a name, a couple of names now. If you would put those in the comment section of this event, because I know I want to go look them up. I'm trying not to write things down or mess around with the technology too much today, because I get so much out of these conversations, and I really don't want to miss a word of what's going on. So, Leland, on then the subject of earned, paid, and owned media, is that an aspect of this that you put into your mix? I know that you've got an extremely not complex. I don't want to use that word because it almost sounds negative, but a very embroidered approach to your marketing strategy.
Well, I'm a real fan, and it's very similar to what Peter just described about Webolutions. I'm a real fan of building your marketing around something that you've created. In my case, I'm using more of the kind of newsletter format because we also do digital printing, so I want to continue to promote both the offline and online media. But we take that newsletter and then we take articles from it and post it on social and post it and send out emails and even some video emails and those kinds of things. So I think, to me, you start with the, I guess you'd call it own media, and earn more media by sharing that on the different platforms. I'm not a big proponent, at least in my business, of the paid media, and the reason being is because it does, to me, it still looks too much like selling. And I really like to try to take the marketing approach as opposed to the selling approach. And so I believe we don't sell, I believe people buy. And I know that there's some, that's very vague, and there's some crossover there, but basically, if people are buying what I want to provide, I just need to tell them why what I have to provide is there, how it's available, and market all of the information around that in terms of the benefits and how it solves their points of pain. If it solves their points of pain, they're going to buy it. And so I really believe in the owned media and the earned media, but as far as the paid media, I'm not a huge proponent of that.
Okay, and again, I mean, what I'm hearing right now is, just we all have, there are so many different ways to look at it, and I think that each of us as individual business people have to decide what feels good for us. Leland, you have a very specific approach because it feels right for you, and so what we then would encourage is that people find what's comfortable for you, is because that will allow you to come across as so much more authentic and genuine to the people. If you truly believe in your approach, then definitely use that approach. Don't change it because somebody else told you to. I want to bring up this comment from Sandra. Getting back to the Facebook discussion that we were just having, to Facebook's point of us boarding for free, which I think is a great metaphor, by the way. We also gave our data to them free. Interesting point, Sandra. So how can we reverse charge them for using our data now? That could be, that's a really good discussion. So thanks for bringing that one up, Sandra, and I hope somebody writes it up in a blog or something like that, because that's a really good one. So okay, we're coming up to the end here, and Sheila, thank you so much again for being here. This group is really dynamic. Thank you for that compliment, Sheila. I echo what Debbie says about finding this an amazing learning venue. And let me tell you, Sheila, if you are ever here in Denver, I would love for you to be able to come to one of our social marketing group actual meetups, because I've been attending them every month for 4 years. I had to take a little bit of a hiatus once when I had a conflict, but conflict in my schedule. But I walk away from that meetup group with so much energy every Friday, and so I'm just thrilled that we're starting this little cycle of pre and post Hangouts so I can really get more out of those. I'm doing this for very selfish reasons, to get more out of that meetup group, and I hope that anybody else who attends it will see the benefit as well. But Sheila, here you are all the way over. And by the way, I wanted to mention, I didn't even see her hashtag before. The warm toe of England is where Sheila visits us from. So yeah, you're right, Sheila. It's a great group. It's a great group. So we're going to wrap this up. Great conversation on B2B, B2C. We didn't even get into all the tools. Carrie Gottschalk again shared some great tools on Facebook, and I'm going to have to pick her brain about some of that stuff. But different ways to use social media to convert leads to sales. So in wrapping up, do either one of you guys have any last words, calls to action, takeaways?
Sure.
Speak up, yeah.
A good sales tip on converting, going back to the theme, converting leads to sales. If you have a sales call, check out that person's LinkedIn page. Chances are, if it's a professional setting, they went to college. So figure out, even if you have to Google it, what their college football team was or basketball team was. Or if you're not a sports fan, they went to the University of Wisconsin, you went to the University of Iowa, you have a similar connection there, and it immediately turns you from just another salesperson pitching them to, oh yeah, absolutely, I can't wait till basketball season starts, or things like that. So that's a good way to actually use the information that's being shared on social media to make that connection as a salesperson. And as soon as you make that connection, you become not the the person just pitching, you become, oh, Peter, yeah, he went to Greeley. I went to Greeley. Oh, you remember how stinky it was up there because of Montfort? Oh my gosh. You know, that kind of a thing. So that would be kind of a practical takeaway that I think salespeople and marketing professionals can use when it comes to using social media.
Excellent takeaway on that. How about you, Leland?
I think what I would say is one of the things that I've learned over the last, especially the last year and a half, is I've learned that I don't know a lot about marketing the way it is today. And you know, you referred to us as mavens or experts or something, and I'm not sure I believe that, because I think maybe what makes us experts is we have this quest for learning, and we continue to read these books and study these things and study the different paradigms like personas and archetypes and different things like that, and try to continue to meld those together to meet the demands of these markets that we're serving. So I guess the thing I would say is that just consider marketing a moving target, and it's not something you learn. It's something you continue to study and continue to practice and continue to get better at.
And Leland, you know what? You provide us with such a great model, because you're right. One of my biggest challenges when I'm working with clients, particularly, you know, us older folks, we want to stick with what we know, but what we know doesn't work anymore, and it's so important for people to have a point of view like yours, Leland, that it's a moving target, and we have to keep learning, and we have to keep trying out new things and being open to these different ways. So thank you for that that bit of advice.
That's what I like about this forum, actually.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. We are going, because we can meet regularly now, you know, and we don't always have to record them. We can have these private HVCs as well, Hangout video chats, where we can really get into each other's heads. And you know, Leland and you and I kind of have a date to do this, because we're going to be looking at persona, and we're going to be looking at some of your other things that you're doing, because you've got some fascinating approaches for how to get that stuff done. So what I want to do is I want to finish up here with, again, Webolutions is our sponsor for our meetup group. Our next Hangout's going to be on March 18th. I didn't know that until I just looked at the notes on the back of the handout that they gave us on Friday. So our next Hangout will be on March 18th, and we're going to preview that month's topic, which is social media's role in customer retention strategies. And this is a continuum. These are all, you know, it's not even a snowball effect. It's a continuum, and it's all interchangeable. So that's going to be the subject of our next meetup. That meetup, the in real life meetup, is March 21st. So on March 18th, we'll get together at 7:30 in the morning here on a Hangout and talk about, you know, what we anticipate, what we hope to learn from that session. And anybody who is in our private SMGDenver community is invited to be a panelist. So if you have any interest in doing that, please get in touch with me, and we'll talk about that. My takeaway on this, it's really a call to action. I'm on this HOA because I was interested in learning how to run HOAs. Now I'm part of a Hangout Mastery group with Ronnie Bincer, and if you don't know Ronnie, it just is because you might be new to Google+, because if you're here for more than a day or two, then you know Ronnie Bincer, and he is the one who gets us all started on Hangouts. I'm in his mastery group, and we study very hard and practice very hard on how to run a good Hangout. I'm on the team that is going to be doing mobile Hangouts on air at the South by Southwest event, which is March 7th through the 11th, I think, in Austin, Texas. I'm going to be sitting right here in Lakewood, Colorado, but I will be working a lot of the technology, the green room, and things like that. So what we're looking for are people who are going to South by Southwest and would make themselves available for an interview while Ronnie Bincer is there doing, you know, a man on the street, what do they call it when somebody's walking around with a microphone? So we're going to get them a big hat that says, you know, Google Hangouts here or something like that. And so if you're going to South by Southwest or know somebody who is and would be willing to play along with us and make themselves available for an interview at South by Southwest, please let me know that. We'd like to get you on a schedule so that you can be interviewed by Ronnie Bincer. the master of Hangouts. So with that, I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you again for a fabulous conversation. And we will see you here on Tuesday, March 18th for our next episode of the SMG Denver Hangout sessions. So long.
Thanks.